Welcome, everyone, to Living with the Times. We're in the midst of the book of Bamidbar, and there are many, many incidences of rebellion, complaints, challenges to Moshe. And in a recent class, Rabbi Ginsburg spoke about an idea that every soul has what we might call a light side and a dark side. In other words, we're all human beings and we do good things, we think good things, we say good things, but we're also challenged and sometimes we fall, and sometimes our darker part of our emotions or our souls express themselves. So every soul has two sides to it, as it were. And he also expressed this idea that the greater the soul, the more forces are put in their way. He called them anti-forces. So we have in science the idea for every action, there's an equal and opposite action. And in the Torah, it says, "Zeh lumat zeh asa Elokim." This against this, God has made. So we see this measure for measure, the good and evil. We have a good inclination and an evil inclination in every person. And so he was talking about Moshe. And we see throughout Moshe's life, he has many adversaries. But what's interesting is sometimes the adversary is actually within the person, and sometimes it's an outer person. But a lot of times the outer person reflects inner characteristics. So the first anti-Moshe figure is when he goes out. He's still the prince of Egypt. He goes out and he sees an Egyptian taskmaster beating a Jew. And to save this Jew, he kills he's called Hamitzri, the Egyptian. And because of that, he has to flee Egypt. He loses his position of prince of Egypt, and he is exiled for many, many years. There are different opinions how many years, but at least 40. And some say even more, until God appeared to him at the burning bush. So what's interesting is that this Mitzri, this Egyptian, Hamitzri, has the same numerical value, the same gematria as the name Moshe. So we see here a very deep thing. Here is Moshe, who is actually at a crossroads in his life. He now understands he's Jewish. He sympathizes with the Jewish slaves, and yet he's Prince of Egypt. And so, he, as part of his identity crisis, he has to kill the Mitzri within himself, the Egyptian within himself. Later, we see that Korach rebels against Moshe. And here we're told by the Arizal that Korach comes from Cain, and Moshe comes from Abel, Cain and Hevel. And so their battle here is really a primordial battle going back to the first brothers, Cain and Abel. And just like Cain killed Abel and then buried him in the earth, here the earth opens up and swallows Korach. An incredible measure for measure. Then there's Pharaoh. Moshe has to confront Pharaoh over and over and over again. And right before the 8th plague, the parsha begins, Bo el Paro. God says to Moshe, come to Paro. Everyone asks, why doesn't it say go to Paro? What does it mean, come to Paro? So the Midrash tells us that God says, I know that he's like a very powerful anti force to you, I will come with you to Pharaoh. So again, we see Moshe is confronted, and we have to remember Pharaoh raised Moshe. Moshe was raised in the house of Pharaoh. So there was a deep connection there. And then we see also with Bilam, we're told that a prophet like Moshe never arose again in Israel. And the sages learned from this, never again in Israel, but there was a prophet among the nations who was his equal, and that was Bilam. So that's the whole story of Bilam and Parshat Balak. The idea here is that the greater the soul, the greater the obstacles that a person faces. And as we said, sometimes the opposition is actually something that we have to work out in ourselves and is being reflected in a person that seems to be in the outer world. There's one other example that Rav Ginsburg also discussed in a different class, and that is in the Gemara. There are many, many stories about Shlomo HaMelech, Solomon, who battled with the king of the dark side way before Star Wars, and he was called Ashmedai. And there's many, many stories of King Solomon battling against this negative, dark force called Ashmedai. And Rav Ginsburg explains that one of the opinions is that there was no actual outside manifestation called Ashmedai. This was an inner battle that Solomon was going through within his own light side and dark side. There are many, many other ways to explain it, but it was a very, very deep insight that these, and they're way out stories about Shlomo and the king of the dark side. And it can be explained that these were forces within Shlomo that he was trying to work out himself. So we can learn very, very important things, that we all have a good inclination and an evil inclination. We all have a light side and a dark side. And actually, Rav Ginsburg pointed out that science in the last decade or two has revealed that it turns out that most of the universe is what's called this mysterious dark energy. And so we as human beings, we have to fight against the darkness within ourselves, in the outer world, and even how physics explains. But that is our challenge. And God wants us to be in the image of God. And we do this by expressing our free will and making the right choices and choosing the good and choosing life and choosing the positive. So we should all have the power to overcome all of our adversaries, whether they're in the outside or in the inside.